Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah and let's talk books. So it is the very last day of May, so we have come to another book wrap-up. I don't remember how many books I've read this month, but there's been some anthologies and some kind of companion stuff, and I know at least one e-arc in there, so I don't really have much to say at all, so let's just jump right into it with the first book, which is The Dogs of Babel by Carolyn Parkhurst. This is a contemporary fiction / mystery. Came out back in 2004, and I gave this 3 stars. So after his wife Lexi dies from apparently falling out of their apple tree in the backyard, Paul turns to the only witness who saw what happened that day, which is their dog, Lorelei. So right away here, I need to say a content warning. There is severe animal cruelty and even mutilation in this book, which is pretty unexpected, just basing off of the description. It is not done by the main character. It is done by like a CD group of people, so it is not something that is like super prominent. Really. And apparently they're knocking on the walls right now, so if you can hear that, I apologize. But it is part of the plot line though, so definitely be aware of that going in, because that might hinder you from picking this up at all. But this book was a 4-star read for me until like the last quarter, then it just kind of fell apart. It's essentially a study on grief and how like we can cling to people and like asking why. And I was completely on board with that, and we really kind of go into Paul's mind and how he's handling that and what he's doing and how he's feeling and stuff. But then the plot just got really convenient in weird ways, and that's kind of where the mutilation part comes in, and it just doesn't suit the rest of the story. It was a bit bizarre, and I don't really feel like it was needed. I think another reason I liked this was just the timing that I read it. I had been reading some books where it was more like experimental writing, so reading something that was as straightforward as this, it was so easy to read and I just flew through it. It's not difficult at all. We do follow 2 timelines here, and it hops back and forth between the 2. We see the timeline before Lexi's death and how they met, and them just being together and kind of enjoying their lives. And then we flip back to Paul, it's like current day, and it's him trying to figure out what happened. And I did think this style suited the book really well. I felt like it was able to show us key moments then without like a lot of fluff around them. We were just kind of able to just zoom in and be like, this is what happened, and then zoom back out and pop back to current day. So I'm going to get into a little bit of spoiler territory here, so I'll pop up where you should jump to go to the next book. So spoilers coming up, just so you know. But I did want to mention how when I read the description for this book, it talked about how Paul suspected that it could be that his wife committed suicide. Because that was in the description, I thought, okay, well, that's not where this is going to go then, because it literally talked about that in the description. But no, it actually does turn out to be a suicide, which is weird, makes no sense, and it's just kind of like, really, all at the same time. That ended up being a real letdown for me, because I had really thought this was going to go in another direction, so I felt a bit bamboozled. But Lexi as a character is not likable. Like, everything just has to be done her way, and minor things literally send her off on destructive rampages. Like, she will destroy things kind of deal. She refuses to get help for it or anything and just keeps ignoring this. But then, the night before she dies, she calls this psychic, dumps all of her problems on this psychic, and she takes what the psychic says literally, and so she kills herself. And it's just kind of like, what? And obviously, she has mental illness problems, but I don't know, it just didn't work with me with what the rest of the story was, because like Paul loved her so much and saw her as just like such this wonderful person, and in reality she was this very destructive, like self-destructive person who committed a very selfish act. And I just felt like it made the act of suicide be more of a light subject than what it deserves. And I don't know, I felt like this book had a lot of promise, but then it just kind of like took these weird turns and I just don't think anyone that picks this up would want that. Next, I read an e-arc that I received through NetGalley. That is Taproot by Kizi Yun. This is an LGBT romance graphic novel. It was originally published in 2017, but the e-arc that I received is for a new 2022 edition that has an alternate cover. And unfortunately, I had to give this 2 stars. So this is pretty much a slice of life about a gardener that can see ghosts and the ghosts that kind of follow him around. And for me, this ended up being very confusing to read. Like when I finished reading it, I was just kind of like looking at it like, that's it? That's the end of the story? I really felt like I had pages missing, and some of the reviews on NetGalley kind of reflect that. But then looking at everything else, I don't think that was the case, but it doesn't really make sense. It would feel like we were leading up into an event and then just skip to when it was over. And I don't know, it felt like I was missing all of the big plot points. And it's not that the story didn't make sense in the end, it just didn't feel worth it or like it really meant anything. But it made this super quick to get through, even for a graphic novel. So like I couldn't imagine paying full price for this book. But because of the feeling, the story moves incredibly fast. There's no build-up, there's no payoff to anything. And slight spoiler, so kind of skip ahead a bit if you don't want to hear that. I'm sorry I'm doing this a lot today. But like it's supposed to be a story about a gardener and a ghost. But the ghost does not stay as a ghost for very long at all. And it's just kind of like, well, you just kind of defeated the purpose of this story. But even the relationship this revolves around, it's very, very instant. We don't really see what made them fall in love with each other. We don't really get a background on them. And any problem is resolved instantly. So there's just nothing to look forward to here. The art style does suit this story quite well. And I did love the drawings of like all the plants and everything. The color palette is very vibrant and there's a lot of different shades of like greens and blues and everything here. I feel like if the story was more fleshed out, the art would really help bring everything to life and that they'd be good like complements to each other. But just with how it's set up, I just don't understand. This had so much potential and it just felt like we're only getting half of the story. Next, I read The Stranger by Albert Camus. Oh, I caught myself. I almost said Camus, but he was French. Or, yes, he was French, so it's Camus, not Camus. This is a French classic. It came out in 1942, and I gave this 3.5 stars. So the reason that I actually read this is because the Meursault Investigation is what won for the month of May for the local book club I'm in, and that's kind of a companion, like it's based off of the story of The Stranger, and they're both short books, so I ended up reading The Stranger first. And pretty much the summary of this book is that it follows this random guy who kills a person on a beach who is only referred to as the Arab. It takes place in Algeria when it was controlled by France, which is why this was like originally written in French and everything. And then the second book takes place after the French-Algerian War, which, wow, that's a crazy thing to learn about if you want to go down that rabbit hole. France committed some war crimes, and it is a very messed up war, which war isn't, but like, yeah, I definitely see why it's something that is a point of contention in France today. So this was another book where I appreciated how simply it was written. Like the guy, we're just following kind of like his train of thought, and it suited him because he pretty much is like devoid of emotion and complicated thoughts. He's very go with the flow kind of deal. His name is Meursault, which is why the second one's called the Meursault Investigation, and he is a boring person. I checked some like analyses of this novella after I read it, and all of them talk about how he lives like this absurdist life and all like this philosophical stuff, yet he goes along with what the people around him are doing. And to me, it just felt like he's wearing this mask to appear like normal, because I don't think that his friends and his girlfriend would have liked him as much if he didn't follow along with like everything that they wanted him to do. Like, he doesn't say no, he just does whatever they want. And so he just seemed to me like a detached person just kind of floating through life. I think the second half of this book is where it really shines. I'm not going to talk about spoilers this time, but there's like this huge courtroom scene, and it's very much a we think this and we're going to make the evidence show that, whether it's true or not kind of deal. And so to me, I'm more interested in like the psychology behind this, where people are really more talking about the philosophy. I'm just like, this dude is not a philosopher. Like, come on. I don't see the absurdism here besides the trial itself. So I don't know if I just don't get it or what. So in the end, even though I enjoyed the story and I enjoyed reading it, I just feel like maybe I'm not intellectual enough to truly understand it based on all the analysis surrounding this story. And so that leads into the next book I read, which is the Meursault Investigation by Kamel Daoud. So yes, they are by two different authors. This came out in 2013, so way later than the other one. This is literally fiction, and the 2013 refers to the French version, and this came out in English in 2015. And unfortunately, I actually liked The Stranger a lot more, as I only gave this 2 stars. So this takes place 70 years after the Arab was killed in The Stranger. The man with no name's brother comes forward to tell his story, which going into this I actually kind of misunderstood, because in The Stranger there are a group of people that are on the beach at first, and then later on it's just the one guy, and I thought the brother was part of the group of people on the beach that day, and so we'd be seeing more of a perspective of what actually happened. That is not the case. The brother was only like 5 years old. He was not there. He was at home with their mother. So this book doesn't have the exact vibe that I was expecting, and it took me forever to read because this book just goes in circles. We learn nothing for the first good half of it, and the way the narrator speaks, he's speaking right at us as the reader. They're basically at this bar and he's just telling his story night after night, but he's just talking himself in circles, and at one point I'm even like, is he really even the guy's brother? I'm questioning literally everything because he's a very, very unreliable narrator, but it's so bizarrely repetitive, it drove me absolutely nuts, which is why it took me so long to get through this, even though, like, as you can see, it's short, it's not that long. So in the end, we don't really get any insight to what happened that day at all. He's not even sure his brother's name is like his name kind of thing. His mom pretty much like feeds him all this false information. Like, it's just absolutely bizarre, and it pretty much just ends up being like how this incident kind of ruined their lives in the end. And I can see why it's an important book. And they do talk about the French-Algerian War in here, because I think this takes place just a few years after they have gained independence, if I'm not mistaken. But the enjoyment factor was not there for me at all. I was not a fan of this, and I feel bad about that. Like, I really wanted this to at least be on par, if not better than The Stranger, but I couldn't, I'm sorry. Next, we are switching gears 100%, going into a completely different genre with Deceived by the Gargoyles by Lillian Lark. This is polyamory smut that came out at the beginning of this year, and I gave it 4.5 stars. So this book follows Grace, who is a plus-sized witch, and she uses the matchmaking services of a bathhouse to try and find the love of her life. She gets more than she bargained for, though, when 3 gargoyles end up entering her life instead. So I found out about this book through a friend. I honestly don't know what intrigued me about it. She seemed to enjoy it, so I gave it a try, and I pretty much like binged it all in one night. I just needed to know like what was gonna happen next. Obviously, like, I don't read this genre often at all. And this year has definitely been the most, and that's been 2. But I ended up being hella into this. The writing here is actually very well done. I was quite shocked. The characters are fully fleshed out. Everyone has their own personality, so no one feels the same at all. Like, you definitely recognize the characters just based off their personality. Like, there's no issues with confusing them at all or anything like that. And also just the world this takes place in, I definitely want to read more about. The magic, the paranormals, the interactions, everything made me want to know more. And Grace's powers in particular are really fascinating, and just how she connects with and adores her powers so much was just nice and refreshing. And then the spicy scenes, like, nothing felt forced. It all felt really natural. There was nothing that felt like out of place or awkward. And I thought they were all like well timed within the story themselves. There was a great variety of scenes. They never felt repetitive, and there's a bug flying around. So overall, just the flow of it just made sense, was so nice, and it just made me fall in love with this book. And the reason it's a 4.5 and not a 5 is because of like the deceived part in the title there. It happens too much. There are like 3 instances where the same character has to come clean about something, and it just kind of got to be cliche and just a like, really, we have to go through this again sort of situation. So overall, this book really took me by surprise. It's actually book 2 of a series, but like they're all standalones kind of thing. They just take place in the same universe. So I will probably check out the first book at some point as well. Next, I read Pieces by Helen Oyayemi. This is LGBT magical realism. This came out in 2021, and I gave this 3 stars. And it's a bit of a glare on there. So this is about Otto and Xavier Shin. They board the Lucky Day train along with their pet mongoose. And they're doing this as like a pseudo honeymoon because they didn't actually get married. Just the one guy took the other's last name kind of deal. The only other passenger on board is supposed to be like this eccentric owner, but there's a lot more to her past, and the other people on board than meets the eye. I'm going to set this down since it is like reflecting way too much. So going into the last 20 pages of this book, I thought it was going to be like a 3.5 for me, but because like some of it I did have to like reread and stuff. It was a bit more on the difficult side to read. It wasn't like hard, but there were sometimes where I'm like, all right, I need to reread this to fully understand kind of deal. But I was enjoying the story. However, I don't understand this ending at all. Like, it's magical realism, so you know it's going to be bizarre, but I can't figure out what happened here. I really don't know. I don't understand what was going on, why it was significant, and yeah, I just don't get it. There are some interesting scenes here though, and I liked some of the flashbacks that they did. The older characters don't really seem to act their ages though. I ended up just thinking that everyone was the same age, but that isn't the case. The interconnection of their stories though is probably the best part of this book, but it comes together in an unsatisfying way that I just could not piece together. In the end. Also, it could use more mongoose scenes, 100%. Next, I read The Best American Short Stories 2021. This was edited by Jessamine Ward and Heidi Pittler. This is an anthology, came out 2021, and I gave this 2 stars. So I picked this up at the library. I'd seen it on the new bookshelf. It wasn't sitting like that. It was like this on like one of those, I don't know, things that hold up books on the shelves like that. And so I just kind of saw that when I went to leave one day and was like, oh, I'm going to grab that and try that out just because I've been on such a short story kick. And also I'm going to put this down because of the reflection as well. But yeah, if those are the best short stories of 2021, I would hate to read the other ones. But I really wanted to give this 3 stars. I really did. But with how the last story made me feel, there was just no way. I was so mad at the end of this book. There are 20 short stories total here, and they all vary greatly, like in genre and quality and everything, obviously. And when I first started reading, I thought this book was all right, but then it just got to be a slog to get through. Like, I really had to push myself. And the second to last story, Biology, ended up being my favorite. But then the very last story, which is called Little Beast, made me so freaking angry. Like, that was the worst 100%. So as with all anthologies, there are a few gems here, but then there are stories that to me, like, I just did not understand the point of. Several of the stories just seem to be people acting evil for no rhyme or reason, like no consequences, and I couldn't figure out what the message is supposed to be, so it's just kind of like, why? And so for me in the end, this title ended up being very misleading, claiming that these stories are the best of the year. Like, that's really high praise, but for me, it just could not live up to that. Next, I read another e-arc, which is Voices That Count by Almudena Grande. This came out in 2021 in Spanish, and then this year, 2022, in English. This is a graphic novel, and I gave this 3 stars. So this one's a little bit different. It is a collection of short comics that celebrate women. So as a woman, I'm obviously pleased to see anything that gives us a voice and discusses the experiences of being a woman and things like that. In particular, there's a quite hard-hitting story in here called The Bug, and that comic is going to stick with me forever, probably. I was hoping that more of the other stories would be more like that one, where they really go in depth and kind of show like the nitty gritty and stuff. But a lot of the other comics were just very surface level. And considering how short this anthology is, which that really surprised me, I would have loved to have seen some longer comics. There's only 9 in here, I believe it is. Some are simply too short to really leave an impact. And like some of them are just like, I did this today, and then I did that, and now I did this, and then that. And it's just kind of like, okay, and what of that? Like, why does that matter? I also would have liked to have seen more comics with more diversity, as it felt like only one type of woman was really being represented here. And I do hope more graphic novels like this get released in the future. It'll be cool to see how they evolve, and I really look forward to seeing that, because for me this one just kind of missed the mark a bit, but obviously like being represented is good. And finally, my final read for this month was Your Body Is Not Your Body, which is edited by Alex Woodrow and Matt Blairstone. This is a horror anthology. It just came out at the beginning of May of this year, and I gave this 4.5 stars. So we had 2 4.5 stars this month. That's awesome. So this is an anthology horror by 30 different trans or queer authors. And this was created in response to those crazy laws that Texas has been putting out, and now that Florida has passed. And that is just kind of spreading like wildfire. But this was created in response to that. So some of the proceeds from this book go to Equality Texas. So if you do purchase this book, it's helping a good cause. But for me, this anthology just started out with a bang. The intro is one of the best I've ever read, and the first story definitely shows you, even though it's only like 2 pages long, definitely shows you what you're getting into, as it's definitely one of the more gruesome, extreme body horror ones. And that energy level of just like starting at 100, it stays at that for a while. The whole first half of the book is like that, and I really enjoyed it. I think there are some of the best short stories I've ever read in this part of this book, and I was 100% thinking I was going to give this a full 5 stars. But then about the halfway point, that energy level kind of dies down, and we get into some more traditional feeling stories, and some that don't really feel like it matches like the prompt here. This also really could have done with some more proofreading. I ran into some really weird, blatant mistakes, and that definitely should have been caught by someone before. And there are also several instances of weird repeating words like throat, sore throat. And there was one instance, I mean, I had repeated sentences, like entire repeated sentences as well, which were obviously not intentional. But I had this one weird situation where I started reading the sentence, and then the sentence started over again, but then it completed the sentence. So like the sentence there was half the sentence and then the entire sentence right after it. And that was obviously not done intentionally. And it was just like really weird, and took me a second to figure out what was happening there. And there were just some also very plain, like obvious typos there as well. So that, and kind of the second half of the book, is why I ended up taking off half a star. Normally I would probably take off a full star and end up rating it a 4, but that first part is just too good for me to do that. So I love horror, we know it, I talk about it a lot here, but I am usually not a fan of body horror. That has never been a subgenre I've really been a fan of. So going into this, I was a little bit nervous because I was thinking it might be too much for me, since the description talks about extreme body horror. That was not the case at all, though. There are actually very few stories in here that made me feel squeamish. Not every story deals with body horror, and only a handful of them are very extreme. So if you feel nervous like I did, I would still check it out. And if you check my full review on Goodreads, you'll see that I have listed all the content warnings for each story, and also I've given a like 1-sentence summary of what the story is about, so I can give you a better idea if this would be something for you or not, as I think pretty much every horror lover would enjoy this. But yeah, overall, this is definitely one of the best anthologies I've ever read, and so far it's on my favorites of the year. Now that I think of it, I probably should have saved that last one for June, considering it's Pride Month, but I mean, this video is going up in June, so that works out in the end. But as always, thank you for hanging out with me. It is greatly appreciated, and until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.